At the reunion, during a dirty party game, Caleb's hand slid under her dress. Their cheering classmates screamed, filming with their phones. "Come on, turn up the heat. The prom queen always belonged to our boy Caleb." That night, she didn't come home. The informant sent me the video while I was polishing her most prized possession, our wedding photo. "Julian, your wife's a real piece of work." The voice on the phone oozed with malice. Caleb said so himself. I set the photo frame down, my own voice perfectly calm. "I know." The private room was thick with smoke, a nauseating mix of cheap perfume and stale booze that made it hard to breathe. The bass from the speakers vibrated through the floorboards, a constant backdrop to the off-key caterwauling that passed for singing. Lauren sat in a corner booth, her fingers unconsciously picking at the condensation on her cold beer bottle. 5 years since graduation, and this crowd was exactly the same, their obnoxious energy a pounding headache. She was starting to regret coming. "Hey, Lauren, what are you hiding over here for?" Kevin, holding a sloshing pint of beer, stumbled over and plopped down next to her, sinking the couch cushion. His face was slick with sweat, his voice booming over the music. "You and Caleb are the stars of the show tonight. The king and queen of our class. So many people were heartbroken you two didn't end up together." The Caleb he was talking about sat directly across from her. The sleeves of his white button-down were casually rolled up to his forearms, revealing an expensive watch. He leaned back against the sofa, a slight smirk playing on his lips, his eyes like hooks that snag her through the swirling bodies and flashing lights. His gaze held nostalgia, curiosity, and an undisguised, raw desire. A jolt went through Lauren. She instinctively looked away, raising her bottle to her lips for a sip. The cold liquid slid down her throat, but it felt like a ball of fire was lodged in her chest. "Totally." Another girl, Jessica, chimed in, her face flushed with exaggerated excitement. "Caleb's a big shot now. And Lauren, you're still gorgeous. It's fate, I'm telling you. We have to play a game to celebrate." "What game?" someone yelled. "Something with a little edge." Kevin slammed his hand on the table, splashing beer everywhere. "Truth or dare? Too cliché. Let's play the adult version. We'll call it Heating Things Up. Who's in?" "Hell yeah. Spicy. Let's do it." The corner of the room erupted. Whistles and the sound of palms slapping the table created a chaotic rhythm. Half a dozen phones immediately went up, their cameras aimed at Lauren and Caleb in the center of the booth. Lauren's face went pale. "Guys, stop fooling around," she said, her voice tight. "That's all in the past." "What's in the past?" Jessica shrieked with laughter, giving Lauren a shove. "Don't be a buzzkill, Lauren. We're all just having fun. Right, Caleb?" Caleb didn't speak. He just watched Lauren, the smirk on his face deepening. He slowly picked up an empty beer bottle from the table, his long fingers wrapping around its neck, and placed it gently in the center of a glass Lazy Susan. "Let's play," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. "What's the matter, Lauren? Scared?" "Who's scared?" The words flew out of her mouth before she could stop them, a direct response to his challenging gaze. She regretted it instantly, but she was surrounded by a chorus of jeers, countless eyes boring into her, the phone cameras glowing like predatory eyes in the dark. She was trapped. "Attaboy, Caleb!" Kevin howled with delight. "Rules are simple. Whoever the bottle points to has to perform a flirty action based on our command. And the stakes," he chuckled, "the higher the better. Am I right, people? Right. Go big or go home." The screams nearly blew the roof off. Kevin gave the bottle a hard spin. It whirled on the glass platter, making a grating sound. Everyone's eyes were locked on it, the air thick with a sick, feverish excitement. Lauren's heart hammered against her ribs, her palms slick with cold sweat. She couldn't look at Caleb, and she couldn't look at the cameras. The bottle spun slower and slower, the neck wobbling before it came to a stop, pointing directly at Lauren. "Whoa!" A massive wave of laughter and whistles washed over her. "Lauren, kicking things off!" Jessica screamed, clapping her hands. "Give her the command. Quick!" Kevin's eyes crinkled mischievously as he yelled. "First command. An intense, 10-second stare down. Timer starts. Now." The gazes and lenses felt like spotlights on her face, burning her skin. She stiffly raised her head, forced to meet Caleb's eyes across the table. His eyes were deep, like bottomless pools, churning with emotion she couldn't and didn't want to decipher. Time ticked by, each second an eternity. She could clearly see the reflection of her own panicked face in his pupils. When the 10 seconds were up, she jerked her head down as if she'd been burned, her heart pounding relentlessly. "Too tame," someone shouted in disappointment. "Patience." Kevin spun the bottle again. This time it pointed to Caleb. "Caleb, your turn." Jessica stomped her feet in excitement. The command, a gentle, romantic head pat. Caleb chuckled softly and stood up. His tall frame was imposing as he walked around the table and stood before Lauren. Her body tensed instantly, and she instinctively tried to shrink back into the couch. His hand was already descending, landing on the crown of her head with a gentle warmth before slowly sliding down the length of her smooth hair to the very tips. The gesture seemed tender, but his fingertips carried an undeniable, possessive weight. Lauren froze, every muscle rigid, the skin where his hand had passed feeling like it was on fire. She could smell the faint scent of his aftershave mixed with tobacco and alcohol, unfamiliar and dangerous. Yeah, that's our guy. Cheers, and the clicking of phone shutters filled the air. The bottle was spun again. It was as if fate were mocking her. Once more, the neck came to a dead stop, pointing at Lauren. Holy shit, Lauren, you're on fire tonight. Kevin's face was twisted with excitement. Let's get a real one in. The command is, he dragged out the word, scanning the eager, debauched faces around him before roaring. Hand on her waist. Over the dress. 10 seconds. Caleb, get to it. No. Lauren cried out, trying to stand up. You play, you pay, Lauren. Don't be a spoil sport. Yeah, don't ruin the fun. A chorus of boos and accusations rose around her. A few hands even pushed down on her shoulders, pinning her to the sofa. Caleb was already leaning over her, his tall frame casting a suffocating shadow. A cruel, playful smile touched his lips. He braced one hand on the back of the couch behind her, and his other hand, with undeniable force, pressed against the side of her waist, right through the thin silk of her dress. The searing heat of his palm burned through the fabric. Lauren shuddered violently, as if struck by an electric current. Blood rushed to her head, then froze in her veins. She bit down hard on her lip, her nails digging into her palms. Humiliation and fear were suffocating her. She could feel his hand moving slowly, suggestively, against her waist, surrounded by the piercing screams and camera flashes. Time's up. Kevin's voice was like a pardon. Caleb pulled his hand away, his fingertips seeming to trace a final, phantom line across her skin. He straightened up, looking down at her like a predator admiring its conquered prey. Lauren collapsed back against the cushions, gasping for air. Her face was ashen, her forehead slick with cold sweat. She felt like she'd been stripped naked and thrown under a spotlight, every inch of her exposed to those greedy eyes. Not enough. We need more. Jessica's shrill voice cut through the air again, laced with a hysterical excitement. Again, spin the bottle. This time, it has to be big. Kevin threw the bottle with even more force. It spun wildly on the platter, emitting a terrifying hum. Lauren closed her eyes in despair, unable to watch. Her stomach churned. She just wanted to escape this hell. When the grating sound finally stopped, the room erupted in a new, almost insane level of screaming. Caleb. It's Caleb. The ultimate command. The ultimate command. Kevin's face was purple with excitement. He jumped onto the table, waving his arms, and screamed with all his might, his voice drowning out everything else. Ultimate command. Hand. Up the skirt. 1 minute. Timer. Starts. Now. A roar went through the room as it descended into absolute chaos. Whistles, screams, the pounding of feet and fists on the table, the beeps of phones recording. It all merged into a destructive tidal wave of sound that completely drowned Lauren. Her mind went blank, seized by a paralyzing terror. She wanted to scream, but her throat was clamped shut, unable to make a sound. The smile on Caleb's face vanished, replaced by the focused, determined look of a hunter closing in on his prey. He leaned in again, his shadow swallowing her once more. This time, there was no hesitation. Watched by dozens of feverishly excited eyes, in front of all those raised phone cameras, his hand, with a cold and unquestionable force, reached directly for the hem of her dress. Lauren's blood rushed to her head, then instantly turned to ice. She clamped her legs together, her hands instinctively gripping the edge of the sofa cushions, her knuckles white from the strain. Humiliating tears welled in her eyes, but she bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, refusing to let them fall. She could feel his hand, hot and invasive, like a cold snake, forcing its way under her dress with an unyielding pressure. It slid up, finding the most sensitive skin on the inside of her thigh. Ah! The screams and whistles around them grew, even more frenzied. Yes, just like that. Caleb, you're the man. Get on video. Get it all. Tom had never moved so slowly. Each second was a dull knife sawing back and forth across her nerves. His hand moved deeper under her dress, a slow, lewd exploration that left a sickening touch and a scalding brand in its wake. She could even hear the strained, excited breathing of Jessica and Kevin beside her. She was a puppet nailed to a pillar of shame, unable to move, able to do nothing but let the cold, humiliating sensation consume her entirely. Time's up. Kevin's voice was both a godsend and a death knell. The hand finally withdrew, but the phantom touch remained, a parasite clinging to her skin. Caleb straightened up, calmly adjusting his cuffs. That look of total control was back on his face, a satisfied smirk. He even gave a slight nod to the people holding up their phones, as if he had just delivered a masterful performance. Lauren slumped into the sofa, feeling as if all her bones had been removed. A wave of immense shame and an indescribable exhaustion washed over her. She didn't even have the strength to wipe away the tears that finally escaped and ran down her cheeks. The room was filled with the half-satisfied laughter and chatter of the crowd. That was insane. Totally worth it. Best reunion ever. So, Caleb, how'd she feel? Huh? Lauren, why's your face so red? You liked that, didn't you? The words were like needles stabbing into her ears. She snatched a half-full glass of whiskey from the table. She didn't know whose it was, and threw it back, downing it in one gulp. The fiery liquid burned its way down her throat, making her cough violently as more tears streamed down her face. But for a moment, the burning sensation seemed to suppress the cold despair and nausea in her heart. Again, let's keep going. Kevin, not yet satisfied, reached for the bottle. I'm done. Lauren shot to her feet, her voice hoarse and choked with tears, teetering on the edge of a complete breakdown. I'm going to the restroom. She practically stumbled as she pushed past the people in her way, tripping out of the private room and escaping the suffocating noise and the sea of sticky, leering eyes. Behind her, she heard Kevin's grumbled complaints and Caleb's low, amused laugh. The hallway was quieter, with only the muffled thump of music coming from distant rooms. The cool air helped clear her head a little, but the feeling of violation, combined with the dizzying burn of the whiskey, made her lean against the wall and dry heave. She saw her pathetic reflection in the polished wall. Hair a mess, eyes red and swollen, makeup smeared. She scrubbed at her cheeks, trying to wipe away the traces of her humiliation, but it only made the mess worse. Lauren, a low, familiar voice said from behind her. Lauren froze, then slowly turned. Caleb had followed her out and was standing just a few feet away. The dim hallway light outlined his tall figure. His face wore a look of concern, but his eyes were bottomless pits. Are you okay? He took a step closer, his voice soft. They got a little carried away in there. I apologize on their behalf. He reached out, as if to touch her shoulder. Lauren flinched back like a startled rabbit, her back hitting the cold wall with a thud. Don't touch me, she hissed, her voice trembling with fear and revulsion. Caleb's hand stopped in midair. The concern on his face vanished, replaced by a cold, appraising look. He tugged at the corner of his mouth, a smirk devoid of any warmth. What? Are you mad? You didn't exactly say no in there. His voice was low, carrying a dangerous magnetism. Or maybe you actually enjoyed it. You're lying. Lauren trembled with rage, fresh tears welling up. You all forced me. Forced you. Caleb scoffed. He took another step forward, his large frame completely enveloping her in his shadow, radiating an intense pressure. Lauren, look at me. His voice held an undeniable command. Lauren was forced to look up, her eyes meeting his. There was no apology in them, no guilt. Only a naked, undisguised possessiveness and the cruel thrill of conquest. Admit it, he whispered, his voice like a snake's hiss in her ear. You've always had a thing for me. That guy, Julian, what is he? What can he possibly give you? His fingers, hot to the touch, gently brushed against her tear-stained cheek in a suggestive, intimate gesture. Look at you now. So beautiful. Even more beautiful when you're being pushed around. His touch made the hair on her arms stand up, and her stomach churned. She wanted to push him away, but her limbs felt heavy as lead. The alcohol and the overwhelming emotional shock were blurring her senses, her will to resist rapidly dissolving. Caleb sensed the forbidden danger in his words. It was all a giant net, wrapping around her, pulling tighter and tighter. Come with me. Caleb's voice was seductive. His hand slid to the small of her back, and he pulled her gently toward him. Don't go back to that boring house. Tonight, let me take care of you. His lips were almost touching her ear, his hot breath on her skin. Lauren's last line of defense, numbed by alcohol and shattered by Caleb's aggressive charm, crumbled. Her body went limp, her consciousness sinking into a chaotic darkness. She didn't know how Caleb half-carried, half-dragged her out of there. All she remembered was the dizzying sensation of the elevator descending, the muffled silence of a thick-carpeted hotel hallway, and the electronic beep of a cold key card unlocking a door. The heavy door closed behind them, shutting out the world. The room was lit by a single, dim bedside lamp, and the air was filled with the scent of an unfamiliar fragrance. Caleb laid her down on the large bed, and the soft mattress sank beneath her. Her head was spinning, her vision blurry. She could only make out the shape of Caleb taking off his jacket, unbuttoning the top 2 buttons of his shirt, and walking toward her like a sleek, dangerous predator. No, a weak, powerless protest escaped her lips, more an unconscious moan than a word. Caleb leaned over her, his fingers gripping her chin, forcing her to look up. In the dim light, his eyes were shockingly bright, filled with a predatory hunger. "Shh," he whispered, his voice full of absolute certainty. "Don't be afraid. I'll make you. Forget everything that's wrong." His kiss, forceful and tasting of alcohol, came down hard, silencing her faint struggles and extinguishing her last shred of consciousness. Outside the window, the city lights flickered silently, turning the room into a secret island of betrayal. Lauren's phone, tossed carelessly onto the carpet in the corner of the room, lit up for a moment before going dark again. The screen showed her lock-screen photo, her wedding picture with her husband, Julian. In the photo, she was smiling brightly, leaning against him, her eyes clear and full of light. But now, that smile was soaked in tears, and that clarity had been drowned in a murky tide of desire. The night was far from over. The heavy blackout curtains completely blocked the morning sun. The room was stale with the smell of old alcohol, lingering fragrance, and an unspeakable, suffocating intimacy. Lauren was woken by a splitting headache. It felt like 1,000 needles were churning inside her brain, each heartbeat bringing a wave of dull pain. She forced her heavy eyelids open, her vision blurry for a long moment before it finally focused. An unfamiliar crystal chandelier, unfamiliar beige wallpaper, the outline of an unfamiliar floor-to-ceiling window. This wasn't her home. Panic seized her. She tried to sit up, but her body ached as if it had been broken and put back together wrong. A specific, intimate part of her throbbed with a distinct soreness, the unmistakable feeling of overuse. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water, chilling her to the bone and shocking her into full awareness. She stiffly turned her neck. Beside her, Caleb was still sound asleep. He was on his side, his back to her, his bare shoulders smooth and muscular. The blanket only came up to his waist. The room was dim, but it was light enough to see the fresh, angry red scratches on his back. Memories of the night before, fragments blurred by alcohol, shattered like ice cubes dropped into boiling water, the sharp edges stabbing into her mind. The deafening cheers, the blinding camera flashes, Kevin's twisted, excited face, Jessica's shrill laughter, Caleb's deep, predatory eyes. And his hand, that hand, forcing its way under her dress, leaving a cold brand on her body. And finally, this dim hotel room. Caleb's heavy body, his hot kisses, his liquor-laced breath, his ruthless possession. Ugh. Lauren clamped a hand over her mouth as a wave of nausea washed over her. She scrambled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold carpet, and stumbled into the bathroom, where she collapsed in front of the toilet and retched violently. Her stomach was empty, and only bitter bile burned her throat. She clung to the cold porcelain bowl, her body shaking uncontrollably, large tears splashing onto the tile floor. It was over. Everything was over. She had betrayed Julian, the quiet, reserved man who loved her not with words, but with his every action, who had tolerated her flaws and given her a safe harbor. She had personally shattered everything they had. An immense wave of fear and regret, like cold vines, wrapped around her heart, squeezing tighter and tighter until she could barely breathe. What was she going to do? How could she face Julian? How could she face the home she had just destroyed? She looked up at the haggard woman in the mirror. Her hair was a tangled mess, her face ghostly pale with dark circles under her eyes. Her lip was split, and her neck and collarbones were covered in angry, dark red hickeys. The marks were like brands of shame, nailed to her skin. She frantically turned on the faucet, cold water gushing out. She scooped it up, scrubbing furiously at her face, her neck, her collarbones. Her skin turned raw and red, even starting to bleed, but the marks, the feeling of being dirty, wouldn't wash away. "You're awake?" A lazy, raspy voice came from the doorway. Lauren froze, spinning around like a cornered animal. Caleb had woken up. He was leaning against the bathroom doorframe, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. His hair was messy from sleep, but his eyes were sharp and clear, filled with a post-coital laziness as he shamelessly scanned her own towel-clad, pathetic form. His gaze made Lauren feel like a used object, unwrapped and discarded. She instinctively clutched the towel tighter to her chest and shrank back, avoiding his eyes. Her voice was dry and hoarse. I have to go home. Home? Caleb raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on his lips as he slowly walked toward her, his presence overwhelmingly oppressive. He reached out, as if to touch her face. Lauren recoiled as if she'd been burned, her back slamming against the cold tile wall. "Don't touch me," she shrieked, her voice sharp with fear and disgust. Caleb's hand stopped in midair. The smile on his face instantly vanished, his expression turning cold and dark. "Lauren, that's not the attitude you had last night," he said, his voice low and menacing. "What's the matter? Woke up with regrets? Or do you just think Caleb, am not good enough for you?" Last night, I was drunk." Lauren's voice was choked with sobs, her body trembling even more violently. "It was a mistake. We were both drunk. Let's just pretend it never happened. Please." "A mistake." Caleb laughed as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. His eyes suddenly turned sharp as daggers, filled with the rage of a man whose pride had been wounded. He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist with a grip so tight it felt like it would shatter the bone, and slammed her against the wall. "You listen to me, Lauren," he hissed, leaning in so close she could feel his hot breath on her face, his voice like ice. "Last night, you came with me. You didn't say no, and now you want to pretend it never happened? Too late." His other hand roughly tore at the towel she was clutching, exposing a fresh hickey on her shoulder. He pointed at the mirror. Look at yourself. With all these marks, you tell me how we can pretend it never happened." "Huh." Pinned against the wall, her wrist screaming in pain, the cold tile pressing against her bare back, Lauren was paralyzed by humiliation and fear. Her teeth chattered, and she couldn't say a word, silent tears streaming down her face. Seeing her break down, a flicker of cruel satisfaction crossed Caleb's face, but it was quickly replaced by a deeper desire. The hand gripping her chin loosened slightly, his thumb now rubbing her tear-streaked face in a lewd gesture. His voice suddenly softened into a false, seductive purr. "Why are you crying? Isn't it better to be with me? Everything Julian can give you, I can give you. Everything he can't, I can give you too. Money, status, excitement. All you have to do is be good." His fingers traced a path from her cheek down to her neck, gently caressing the glaring marks. Lauren jerked her head away, dodging his touch. Her voice was broken, but laced with a desperate resolve. "No, I love my husband. I want to go home." Love. The word seemed to enrage him completely. He abruptly let her go, his eyes dark and menacing. "Fine. A lot of good love will do you." He pointed toward the door, his voice glacial. "Get out. Get the hell out right now. Lauren, you'll regret this. You'll come crawling back to me, begging." As if granted a pardon, Lauren ignored the soreness in her body and her utter dishevelment. She scrambled to pick up her scattered clothes from the floor, not daring to look at Caleb again, and stumbled out of the bathroom, out of the sickening hotel room. She hastily pulled on her wrinkled dress, grabbed her purse, and fled the hotel like a fugitive. Standing on the bustling street, the cool morning air made her shiver. The sunlight was bright, but it offered no warmth, only a profound, bone-deep cold. She walked like a ghost toward the subway station, every step like walking on knives. She was afraid to take a cab, afraid the driver would see the state she was in. The crowded subway car felt suffocating. Every casual glance that swept past her neck made her feel like the hickeys were burning under the public gaze. She kept her head down, using her hair as a shield, wishing she could disappear into the floor. Finally, she was home. She stood at the entrance to their apartment building, looking at the familiar front door, but it felt like she was staring into the mouth of a vast, dark abyss. She took out her key, her hand shaking so badly it took several tries to get it into the lock. The click of the key turning echoed unnaturally loudly in the quiet hallway. The door opened. The apartment was quiet, filled with a faint, familiar scent of lemon cleaner. The living room curtains were drawn, casting the room in dim light. Julian was standing in front of the TV console, his back to the door. Lauren's heart leaped in her throat. She held her breath, tried to tiptoe back to the bedroom like a thief, unseen. "You're home." Julian's voice, calm and even, suddenly cut through the silence. It was like a clap of thunder, striking Lauren's frayed nerves. Her body went rigid, her blood freezing in her veins. She was rooted to the spot, unable to move. Julian slowly turned around. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and sweatpants, and in his hand, he held a soft white cloth. He had been cleaning the elegant silver frame on the console. Inside the frame was their wedding photo, taken 2 years ago. In it, Lauren wore a brilliant white gown, her smile bright and radiant as she leaned against Julian in his sharp suit. Julian's expression was, as always, a bit reserved, but his eyes were gentle, a soft smile on his lips. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the church, casting warm patches of light on them. Now, Julian stood before that photo, holding the cloth, gently wiping the glass surface as if handling a priceless treasure. His face was obscured in the dim light, his expression unreadable. Watching his calm, methodical movements, Lauren was consumed by a tsunami of guilt and panic. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain, to apologize, but her throat was choked shut, unable to form a sound. She couldn't even breathe. The air was as heavy as lead. Julian didn't look at her. He continued to polish the frame, his movements meticulous. His fingers were long and slender, moving across the glass without a sound. The living room was dead silent, except for the soft tick-tock of the wall clock, each tick a hammer blow against Lauren's heart, like death by 1,000 cuts. Time seemed to stretch on forever, each second an agony. Lauren felt like she was about to be crushed by the silent pressure. She could smell the faint, foreign scent of the hotel and of Caleb still clinging to her, and it made her want to crawl out of her own skin. Finally, Julian stopped. He tilted his head slightly, and his gaze finally fell upon her. His eyes were calm as a deep, frozen lake, without a single ripple, without any warmth. He just looked at her, as if examining an object that had nothing to do with him. The look sent a chill through Lauren's entire body. She instinctively wrapped her arms around herself, her nails digging into her flesh. She wanted to run, but her feet were nailed to the floor. Julian's gaze swept over her messy hair, her pale, frightened face, and the obviously wrinkled, booze-scented dress. His eyes seemed to linger for a fraction of a second on the spot on her neck she was trying to hide with her hair, so quickly it was almost imperceptible. Then he said nothing. No questions, no anger, not even a flicker of emotion. He simply looked away, carefully folded the white cloth, and placed it next to the photo frame. Then, as if nothing had happened, he turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her with nothing but his cold, silent back. I'm going to take a shower, Lauren finally managed to say, her voice hoarse and thick with unshed tears and a tremor she couldn't hide. She fled into the master bathroom and locked the door behind her. Sliding down the cold wood of the door until she was sitting on the floor, Lauren couldn't hold it in any longer. She clamped both hands over her mouth, but desperate, suppressed sobs escaped through her fingers, echoing in the small, enclosed space. Outside the door, the apartment was utterly silent. Julian didn't follow. He didn't knock. There was no sound at all. Only the silent, immense pressure seeped through the door, weighing down on her heart, making it impossible to breathe. She didn't know that the moment she rushed into the bathroom, Julian had stopped at the kitchen entrance, his back to the master bedroom. The hand at his side slowly, powerfully, clenched into a fist. His knuckles turned white from the strain, the veins on the back of his hand standing out, trembling slightly. His head was bowed, his hair hiding his eyes, his expression unreadable. Only the taut, rigid line of his jaw betrayed the volcanic rage he was forcefully suppressing, a rage powerful enough to destroy everything. For the next 2 days, the apartment was a meticulously maintained ice sculpture of a tomb. Lauren called in sick to work and locked herself in the bedroom, like a terrified snail retreating into its shell. She couldn't look Julian in the eye, couldn't bear to be in the same room with him for more than a minute. Every time she left the bedroom felt like walking on thin ice, holding her breath, moving with excruciating care. Julian, meanwhile, operated like a pre-programmed machine. He went to work on time, came home on time, and then retreated into his study or sat on the living room couch watching the financial news on mute. He still prepared simple meals and left them on the table, but they never ate together. The air was thick with a suffocating, cold distance. Lauren tried countless times to work up the courage to explain, to apologize, to say just a simple "I'm sorry." But every time she saw Julian's calm, emotionless face or the focused, cold profile he presented while polishing their wedding photo, the words would die in her throat, turning into a heavy lump of lead. She even began to delude herself. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe that night was just a nightmare. If I just hide the wounds carefully, time will wash it all away. On the evening of the third day, the setting sun cast a false, warm glow over the cold living room. Julian sat on the couch, a financial magazine open in front of him, though he hadn't read a single word. His gaze was fixed on the silver photo frame on the coffee table, which had been polished until it gleamed. The smile on Lauren's face in the picture stung his eyes. Just then, his phone, resting on the arm of the couch, began to vibrate. A completely unfamiliar local number flashed on the screen. Julian stared at the digits, his expression unchanging. He picked up the phone, swiped to answer, and held it to his ear without speaking. There was a 2-second pause on the other end. Then a man's voice, deliberately lowered and dripping with malice and glee, slithered through the line like a snake. "Hello, is this Julian?" Julian's Adam's apple bobbed, almost imperceptibly. The knuckles of the hand holding the phone turned white, but his voice remained as steady as a frozen lake. "This is he. Who's calling?" "Haha." The man on the other end let out a sleazy chuckle. "Who I am isn't important. What's important, buddy, is that I've got something to show you. I guarantee it'll be a real eye-opener." The voice was thick with lewd insinuation. Julian's eyes instantly darkened, like a deep pool icing over. He remained silent, his breathing becoming incredibly slow and deliberate. The caller seemed pleased with his silence, taking it as a form of consent. There was a rustling sound, as if he were fumbling with his phone. A few seconds later, Julian's screen lit up with a friend request from an unfamiliar social media account, accompanied by a message, "Accept this. The good stuff is on its way." Julian stared blankly at the request, his finger hovering over the screen for a moment before he tapped accept. Almost immediately, a video file was sent over. The file name was a random jumble of letters and numbers. "Go on, open it," the voice on the phone said, trembling with an eagerness that was almost orgasmic, the malice practically dripping from the receiver. "Take a look at your wife." TSK, what a wild one. Caleb said so himself. Said she was great in bed. Huh. The name Caleb was like 2 red-hot pokers searing Julian's eardrums. His hand tightened on the phone, his joints emitting a faint crack. But he still made no sound. He simply used his other hand to tap open the video file. The screen lit up. The picture was shaky and dark, filled with deafening music and the sound of frenzied cheering. In the center of the frame was the one person he knew better than anyone, Lauren. She was sitting in a booth, her face pale, her eyes wide with helpless terror. And the man, Caleb, was leaning in close, a sickening, triumphant smile on his face. Then, amidst the insane roars of "Up the Skirt, Do It" from the surrounding crowd, in front of countless raised phone cameras, Caleb's hand, with a blatant and horrifying aggression, forced its way under Lauren's dress. The video ended there, frozen on the final frame of Caleb's guilty hand disappearing under the hem of her skirt, and on Lauren's face, etched with despair and humiliation. Time seemed to stop. The living room was dead silent, the only sounds being the faint echo of the video's chaos from the phone's speaker and the informant's heavy, excited breathing on the other end of the line. Julian remained motionless, still holding the phone to his ear. His head was bowed, his hair falling over his eyes, hiding his expression. The last rays of the setting sun hit one side of his face, while the other was lost in deep shadow. The back of the hand holding the phone was a roadmap of bulging veins, the knuckles a terrifying shade of white, as if he were about to crush the device into dust. The caller, unnerved by the long silence, or perhaps just eager for his reward, spoke again, his voice now tinged with a sycophantic urgency. "Hey, Julian, you see that? I'm a good buddy, right? Man, getting cheated on like that. TSK, I feel for you, man. That bastard Caleb is a real piece of work. And Lauren, acting all high and mighty, but deep down." "Explain," Julian finally spoke. His voice was low and raspy, like sandpaper on rusted iron. Each word was laced with ice, chillingly cold, yet unnervingly calm. The kind of calm that precedes a volcanic eruption capable of incinerating everything. The man on the other end froze, the rest of his filthy words catching in his throat. It took him a moment to understand what Julian was asking. "Oh, right. It was 2 nights ago, at Vibe Lounge, their class reunion. Kevin, Jessica, those scumbags were egging them on, playing some kind of flirty game. It got way out of hand. That bastard Caleb just took his chance. That's what the video is. Later Lauren was drunk, and that son of a bitch took her with him. Where they went? Heh, I don't know, but you can guess it wasn't for coffee. A hotel, obviously. Julian, you gonna let this slide? If it were me." "I know." Julian cut off his rambling, inflammatory speech. The same 2 words, perfectly calm, betraying no emotion. The informant was clearly thrown off by this reaction. Julian? What are you going to do? You want me to? Beep, beep, beep. The only response was the decisive sound of the call being disconnected. Julian slowly lowered the phone. The screen was still lit, frozen on that shameful scene. He didn't look at it again. He simply placed the phone face down on the cold glass coffee table with a soft click. He raised his head, his gaze once again falling on the silver photo frame on the TV console. In the picture, Lauren was leaning against him, her smile radiant, her eyes clear, full of hope for the future. That smile, to Julian now, was blindingly sharp, a bitter irony, 1,000 daggers tipped with poison stabbing into his heart. He stood up and walked to the console. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the dimming light, completely engulfing the small photo frame. He reached out, not for the frame, but for the neatly folded white cloth beside it. He picked up the cloth and, with that same gentle, almost reverent focus, began to polish the glass surface of the frame again. His long, strong fingers, separated from the glass by the soft cloth, moved slowly, meticulously, over the image of Lauren's smiling face, over her white wedding dress, over his own faintly smiling profile. Back and forth, back and forth. The living room was terrifyingly quiet. The only sounds the faint swish of the cloth against the glass and the tick-tock of the wall clock. In the dead silence, the sounds were amplified, creating a heart-pounding rhythm. Julian polished for a long time, with great care, as if he were tending to a priceless artifact or performing some silent, final ritual. His eyes were on the photo, but they were unfocused, bottomless, like two black holes that had swallowed all light. There was no anger, no sadness, no pain, only a vacant, chilling stillness. Beneath that stillness, a violent, destructive undercurrent churned. He polished for a long time, until the glass was so clean it reflected his own face, now as cold and impassive as a statue. Finally, he stopped. He carefully folded the cloth and put it back in its place. Then, he turned and, without a single backward glance at the photo frame, walked toward his study. His steps were steady, without a hint of hesitation or faltering. The study door closed softly behind him, shutting out the last sliver of light from the living room. Inside, it was completely dark. Julian walked to the large desk and sat down. The neon glow of the city outside filtered through the blinds, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across his face. He turned on his computer. The cold white light of the monitor illuminated his expressionless face and the deep, terrifyingly cold, killing intent in his eyes. He moved the mouse and clicked open an encrypted folder. It was filled with a dense array of files, photos, screenshots of contact lists, bank statements, all meticulously organized and clearly labeled. One folder was named, starkly, Caleb Origin Core Tech. Another was named, Kevin Summit Construction Supplies. And the third, Jessica Elysian Beauty SBA. He clicked open the Caleb folder. Inside, besides Caleb's personal information and family background, was a wealth of detailed information about Origin Core Tech. Financial statements from the last 3 years, with certain sections circled in red, a list of major clients, information on several key ongoing projects, and even screenshots of seemingly innocuous emails with suppliers. The level of detail was terrifying. This was clearly not something collected overnight. Julian's gaze, sharp as a hawk's, lingered on the red-circled financial data. He opened an encrypted messaging app and found a contact saved simply as K. His fingers moved across the keyboard, steady and strong, the crisp click-clack of the keys unnaturally loud in the silent room. A line of cold text appeared on the screen. K. Origin Core Tech. Objective: a complete evidence chain of financial fraud. Timeline: 3 days. Deliver irrefutable proof. Rate is doubled. He hit send. Almost instantly, a reply came back, a single concise letter. R. Received. Julian closed the chat window and clicked on another contact, L. He typed again, L. Target: Kevin, Sales Manager, Summit Construction Supplies. Investigate all illicit dealings. Focus: solicitation, bribery, embezzlement. Need hard evidence. No fixed timeline, but be quick. Received. L's reply was just as swift. Next, a third contact, M. Target: Jessica, shareholder, Elysian Beauty Spa. Find evidence of tax evasion, use of banned substances, and the sale of client data. Again, needs to be irrefutable. Understood. M's response followed immediately. After sending the messages, Julian leaned back in his large leather chair and slowly closed his eyes. The only sound in the room were the faint hum of the computer and his own slow, deep breaths. In the darkness, the hand resting on the armrest slowly clenched into a fist again. This time it wasn't trembling with suppressed rage, but with a coiled, destructive sense of control. His knuckles made a faint popping sound. His mouth, unseen in the shadows, slowly, coldly twisted upward. It wasn't a smile. It was the unsheathing of a razor blade, glinting with a deadly light. 3 days. That's all he needed. The game had begun. 3 days crawled by in dead silence and unspoken agony. On the morning of the 4th day, sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting cold bars of light across the wooden floor of Julian's study. He sat at his computer, the screen filled with the jagged lines of stock market charts. The coffee beside him was long cold, but he didn't seem to notice. Suddenly, an encrypted chat window began flashing urgently in the bottom right corner of the screen. It was K. Julian clicked it open. A compressed file was being transferred, with no accompanying text. Julian's expression remained unchanged, as precise as a calibrated instrument. He downloaded it, then unzipped it. The folder contained over a dozen scanned documents, forged purchase orders, double-entry invoices, fraudulent bank records, and even screenshots of encrypted communications between Origin Core's CFO and Caleb himself. The messages explicitly showed Caleb instructing his finance chief to inflate profits and conceal losses. The chain of evidence was clear, complete, and as cold as iron links, forged one by one to irrevocably trap Caleb and his company. Julian's eyes quickly scanned the shocking numbers and signatures, confirming everything was in order. He picked up a second phone from his desk, one he never used for personal matters, its number known only to a select few. He dialed a number, and the call was answered on the second ring. "You have materials?" Julian's voice was flat, as if discussing something that had nothing to do with him. "We do, Mr. Vance," a steady male voice replied on the other end. "They're very thorough. We're initiating the process now. The story will break as planned before the market opens. The anonymous tips to the SEC and the IRS will be delivered simultaneously." "Good," Julian said, and hung up. He glanced at the time in the corner of his screen. 8:45 a.m. 15 minutes until the market opened. He closed the encrypted chat and opened a standard financial news website. The page refreshed, showing nothing out of the ordinary. For now, all was calm. The minutes ticked by. The study was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. 8:59 a.m. Suddenly, the website's homepage violently refreshed. A bold, blood-red headline exploded across the screen like a bombshell. "Exclusive. Origin Core Tech implicated in massive financial fraud. Over $300 million in fabricated profits. SEC, IRS launch investigation." Below the headline were several blurred-out screenshots of key evidence and a scathing report that directly accused the company's CEO, Caleb, of manipulating financial data and defrauding investors. At the exact same moment, on Julian's monitor, the stock chart for Origin Core Tech, ticker OCTC, was slammed downward by an invisible giant's fist at the opening bell. It formed a horrifying, perfectly straight, glaringly green line plummeting toward the floor. A crash. A freefall. Dash 10%. Limit down. The stock was frozen at its lowest possible price the instant the market opened. Sell orders piled up into a mountain. Buy orders were non-existent. The cold numbers flashed on the screen, each flicker representing another chunk of Caleb's fortune vaporizing into thin air, another crack in the foundation of the business empire he had built. Julian watched the glaring green line, watched the massive number of sell orders locked at the bottom. His face was a blank mask, his eyes as deep and calm as the sea before a hurricane. The index finger of the hand resting on his mouse tapped once, very lightly, in a steady rhythm. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office at Origin Core Tech, Caleb was screaming into his phone, his face livid. "Is our PR department full of idiots? Issue a statement. A denial. This is a malicious short seller attack. It's slander." He had just sunk a massive amount of capital into a new project. His cash flow was already stretched to its limit. "Mr. Hayes, we issued the denial. But it's not working." The voice on the other end was choked with panic. "The SEC and the IRS. They're downstairs. They're here to seize our financial records. And the bank just called. Our line of credit has been frozen. Several major clients are calling to terminate their contracts." "What?" The word hit Caleb like a bolt of lightning. The phone slipped from his grasp, thudding onto the expensive carpet. He lunged toward the massive floor-to-ceiling window and looked down. Sure enough, several cars with official government agency seals were parked at the entrance. and men in suits were striding purposefully into the building. It's over. The two words stabbed into his brain like ice picks. Everything he had worked for years to build, the wealth and status he was so proud of, was crumbling before his very eyes. Rage, fear, and despair washed over him. He spun around, pacing his office like a caged animal, his expensive Italian leather shoes sinking into the plush carpet. Who was it? Who the hell was doing this to him? In a flash of insight, a cold, calm face materialized in his chaotic mind. Julian. Lauren's husband. That quiet, unremarkable man. Julian, it was you. It has to be you. Caleb's eyes were bloodshot. He squeezed the name through his teeth, his voice laced with pure hatred. He bent down and snatched his phone from the floor, his hands shaking so violently with rage he could barely hold it. He found Lauren's number and dialed frantically. The phone rang for a long time before she picked up. Hello. Lauren's voice was thick and exhausted. It was clear her last few days had been hell as well. Lauren. Caleb's voice was a distorted, monstrous thing, twisted by pure rage and terror. Your goddamn husband. Julian. He's trying to ruin me. He's trying to destroy me. You tell him to stop. Do you hear me? Or I'll make sure you both go down in flames. Lauren was clearly stunned by the sudden, insane tirade. It took her a few seconds to process his words, her own voice trembling with disbelief and fear. What? What are you talking about? Julian. What did he do? Caleb, calm down. Calm down. My fucking company is about to go bankrupt. I'm about to go to jail. How the hell am I supposed to calm down? Caleb shrieked hysterically. You tell him. Now. Immediately. Stop whatever he's doing. Or I'll post a video from that night everywhere. I'll let the whole world see what kind of trash his wife is. I'll make Julian a complete laughingstock. We'll all go down together. Video. Lauren's voice shot up, filled with pure terror. What video? Caleb, you recorded it. You bastard. You're disgusting. She broke down into hysterical sobs. Cut the crap. Caleb barked, cutting her off. Just do what I said. Make Julian stop, or you'll face the consequences. He spat the last words into the phone, and without waiting for a reply, slammed the end call button and hurled the phone against the wall. Crack. The phone shattered into pieces. Caleb stood there, panting, his chest heaving like a dying animal's. He stared at the scattered fragments on the floor, then at the glaring official vehicles outside his window. The immense fear finally overwhelmed his anger. No, he couldn't just sit here and wait for the end. He had to find Julian. He had to make him stop, face to face. Like a madman, he burst out of his office, ignoring his secretary's frightened shouts, and jabbed the button for the underground garage in the elevator. A black Mercedes G-Wagon roared out of the Origin Core tech garage like an out-of-control bolt of black lightning, merging violently into traffic. Caleb's eyes were red-rimmed, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, his foot flooring the accelerator. He had only one thought in his mind: find Julian. Make him stop, no matter the cost. He remembered Lauren mentioning that Julian worked for a major investment group, located in the Orion Tower in the downtown financial district. Driving on pure, frantic memory, he sped toward it. In front of the Orion Tower, Julian had just finished a morning meeting and was walking out through the grand revolving doors. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, his posture erect, his expression impassive, heading for a black Audi A8 parked at the curb. Just then, a black G-Wagon screeched to a halt at a dangerously sharp angle, its tires screaming against the pavement as it stopped just inches from Julian. The driver's door flew open, and Caleb stormed out like an enraged lion. His hair was a mess, his eyes were shot with blood, and his expensive suit was rumpled, his tie askew. The polished elite image was gone, replaced by pure desperation. Julian. Caleb lunged, stopping right in front of him. His body was trembling with a mixture of rage and fear, his voice a hoarse rasp. Was it you? Did you do this? Julian stopped walking. He looked calmly at the crazed man before him. His eyes were like he was looking at a piece of garbage, devoid of any emotion, not even disgust. He even raised a hand to lightly brush a speck of dust from his suit sleeve, kicked up by the Mercedes. Say something, you bastard. Caleb was completely unhinged by Julian's utter indifference. He yanked a wrinkled file from his briefcase, the contract for the new project he had been counting on to bring in massive profits. Like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood, he slammed the contract onto the hood of Julian's Audi with a dull thud. Stop. Julian, you stop this right now. Caleb pointed a shaking finger at the papers. You see this? A new project. Big money. If you stop this contract, this project, we split the profits. 70-30. No, 50-50. It's all yours. I just need my company to survive. I'm begging you. His voice shifted from a roar to something closer to a plea, thick with the despair of a man with no options left. Dignity, pride, they were worthless in the face of total annihilation. Julian's gaze finally moved from his sleeve to the crumpled contract on the hood of his car. He looked at it for a few seconds, then slowly raised his eyes to meet Caleb's again. His expression was cold, indifferent, and held the kind of detached pity one might reserve for an insect. No, not even pity. Just a complete, chilling void. He tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth pulling up in a slow, deliberate motion. It wasn't a smile. It was a silent mockery. Then, as Caleb watched through his bloodshot, desperate eyes, clinging to one last shred of hope, Julian reached out. Not to take the contract, but to place his hand on top of it. Then, as Caleb's pupils contracted in horror, Julian's hand clenched. Rip! The sharp, tearing sound of paper filled the air. The contract, the vessel of Caleb's last hope, was instantly ripped in two in Julian's strong, steady hand, as if it were nothing more than a piece of scrap paper. The torn pieces fluttered to the cold pavement like dying butterflies. The color drained from Caleb's face, leaving behind a deathly, ashen gray. His mouth hung open, a choked, rasping sound escaping his throat, but he couldn't form a single word. His final bargaining chip had been destroyed like trash. Julian didn't even glance at the pieces. He withdrew his hand and once again brushed at his sleeve, as if to remove some non-existent dirt. His movements were elegant, unhurried. Then, he opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. The black Audi A8 started smoothly and pulled away from the curb. As it passed the petrified, deathly pale figure of Caleb, the window lowered just a crack. Julian's cold gaze met Caleb's broken one for the last time. His lips moved, forming two words. The sound wasn't loud, but it was like a steel needle dipped in ice, piercing Caleb's eardrums. Garbage. The window slid up, sealing him off from the world. The black Audi merged into the flow of traffic and disappeared down the street as if it had never been there. It left Caleb standing alone in front of the cold, imposing entrance of the Orion Tower, the shredded remains of his last hope at his feet. He stared blankly in the direction the Audi had gone, then looked down at the scraps of paper. An immense cold tide of despair finally washed over him, drowning him completely. His knees buckled. No longer able to support himself, he fell with a thud, his body hitting the hard concrete. The knees of his expensive suit trousers were instantly covered in dust. He pressed his hands to the ground, bowing his head low, his shoulders shaking violently. It wasn't crying. It was the desperate, suppressed, guttural sound of a dying animal, a whimper of utter agony. It was over. Everything was over. News of Caleb's public breakdown in front of the Orion Tower, while not making mainstream headlines, sent ripples through certain circles, especially among those who had been at the reunion. Kevin and Jessica were among the first to receive the grainy, long-distance photos and video clips from friends. The pictures showed Caleb's flashy G-Wagon blocking an Audi, and Caleb himself, a pathetic figure kneeling on the ground, his head bowed, surrounded by scattered pieces of paper. The video was silent, but his utterly defeated posture radiated a palpable despair. Kevin was in his small sales manager's office, leering at pictures of models online. When the photos came through, he first blinked in confusion, then burst into gloating laughter. Ha ha ha, that son of a bitch Caleb. He finally got what was coming to him. Acted like he was king of the world, and now look at him. Serves him right. He slapped his desk, spraying spittle as he showed off to a curious colleague. See that? That's what happens when you mess with the wrong people. TSK, TSK, that's a perfect kneeling posture. He didn't connect the event to himself at all. He just assumed Caleb had made a bad business deal and angered someone more powerful, and he was happy to watch the show. He even started humming to himself, planning where he'd go to celebrate that night. Jessica saw the news in the VIP room of her lavishly decorated beauty spa while giving a facial to a wealthy client. When her phone buzzed and she glanced at the picture of Caleb on his knees, her hand slipped, nearly poking the client in the eye with a glob of moisturizer. Hey, Jessica, be careful, the client complained. So sorry, Mrs. Davison. My hand slipped. Jessica apologized profusely, but her heart was pounding. Caleb, the powerful, untouchable Caleb, was kneeling. A wave of inexplicable unease washed over her. After finishing with the client, she hid in her small office and replayed the video clip over and over, a growing dread tightening its grip on her. She thought back to the reunion, to how she had been the loudest one cheering, how she had physically pushed Lauren into the game. And then she thought of Julian, Lauren's quiet, reserved husband. Could it be him? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She wanted to call Lauren, but her finger hovered over the contact name, hesitating. What would she say? What would she ask? And what if? What if it really was Julian? Calling would be like admitting her own guilt. She tossed her phone aside, tried to reassure herself. No way. Caleb must have screwed up a deal. It has nothing to do with me. But once the gears of fate begin to turn, they don't stop for wishful thinking. A few days later, the sales office at Summit Construction Supplies was as boisterous as ever. Kevin was holding court, regaling his subordinates with a graphically detailed story about his conquest at some exclusive club the night before. Suddenly, the office door was thrown open. The company's HR director walked in, flanked by 2 security guards, his face grim. Behind them were 2 uniformed police officers. The noisy office fell silent. All eyes snapped to the door. The HR director marched straight to Kevin's desk, his voice cold and robotic. Kevin, you're fired. Pack your personal belongings and leave the premises immediately. What? The lewd grin on Kevin's face froze. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're firing me? For what? I'm your top salesman. I've made this company a fortune. For what? The director sneered, slapping a file down on Kevin's desk. For this. The company received an anonymous tip, which has been verified. During your time as sales manager, you repeatedly used your position to embezzle over $1.2 million in company funds, which you then spent on gambling and prostitutes. We have irrefutable proof. The company has already filed a police report. EMB, embezzlement. The color drained from Kevin's face. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He snatched the file, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. Inside were clear records of his crimes, falsified client receipts, inflated expense reports, with dates, amounts, and destinations listed in excruciating detail. There were even several photos of him at the entrance of various clubs, his arms around scantily clad women, taken on the very nights he had just been bragging about. No, this isn't. This is slander. It's fake. It's all fake. Kevin shrieked like a cornered animal, waving the papers, his voice a pathetic mix of bravado and terror. You can explain whether it's slander to the police, the HR director said, taking a step back. The 2 officers stepped forward and presented their badges. Kevin Miller, you're under arrest for suspicion of corporate embezzlement. Please come with us. With a sharp click, a pair of cold steel handcuffs snapped around Kevin's wrists. The metallic chill shocked him to his core, and the full weight of his terror finally crashed down on him. His legs gave out, and he would have collapsed if the officers hadn't grabbed him by each arm. No, let me go. I'm innocent. Honey, help me. Kevin started screaming like a pig being slaughtered, tears and snot streaming down his face as he struggled. His desperate eyes scanned the office until they landed on his wife, who had been called to the scene and was now standing there, her face a mask of shock and fury. Kevin, you animal. You son of a bitch, she shrieked. Seeing the contents of the file and the disgusting photos, she completely broke. She lunged forward, her long nails raking across his face with all the hatred and humiliation she felt. Arg! Fiery pain seared Kevin's cheeks as bloody scratches appeared on his face. Pinned by the officers, he couldn't dodge, only let out a piercing scream. You stole money to pay for whores. How could you do this to me? To our children? You bastard. You piece of filth. Why don't you just die? His wife was hysterical, crying and screaming as she clawed at him, turning the scene into chaos. Their colleagues stared mouths agape. A few quietly pulled out their phones to record. Finally, amidst his wife's hysterical curses and the pitying, contemptuous stares of his co-workers, Kevin was dragged out of the office like a dog, the camera lenses of a dozen phones following his every move. His face was a bloody mess, his expensive suit was torn, and the shiny handcuffs on his wrists reflected the bright, humiliating light of the sun. He was finished. His job, his family, his reputation, everything was gone. At almost the exact same moment Kevin was being dragged away, Jessica's beauty spa was facing its own apocalypse. Several official vehicles with tax enforcement and business standards agency logos pulled up in front of Elysian Beauty Spa. Uniformed officials filed in, their faces grim. Routine inspection. Please cooperate, the lead agent said, flashing his credentials in a tone that allowed for no argument. Jessica was in the middle of upselling an elderly client an outrageously expensive placenta extract facial. The sight of the agents made her face drain of color. She forced a smile. Oh, gentlemen, what a surprise. Please have a seat. Jean, get some tea. The good stuff. That won't be necessary, a tax agent said flatly. We need to see all of your accounting books, receipts, sales records, and purchase orders for the last 3 years. The books. Our accountant took the day off today. Jessica stammered, sweat beading on her forehead. That's fine. We can wait. Or we can seal the accounting office right now. The agent's tone was non-negotiable. Jessica's heart sank. She knew her books were a mess. She had cooked them so many times to evade taxes, she couldn't even count the number of fake invoices she'd created. What truly terrified her, however, was when an agent from the Business Standards Agency walked directly to her product display. He began randomly selecting samples and then produced a document. We've received a complaint, and our preliminary investigation confirms that several of your products, including the Youthful Rebirth and Ultimate Age-Defy lines, contain illegal substances, including banned corticosteroids and heavy metals. These products, and all related inventory, are hereby confiscated. That's impossible. We use certified imported products. We have the permits. Jessica shrieked, her voice cracking. Permits? The agent sneered, slapping a lab report down in front of her. This is a report from a certified lab. Read it yourself. Furthermore, the complaint also alleges that you have been illegally collecting and selling client data, including contact information, purchase history, and even private photos for targeted marketing and other illicit purposes. Ms. Miller, please come with us to assist in our investigation. Selling information? Private photos? The elderly client, Mrs. Davison, shot up from her chair, her face still covered in a clay mask. Jessica, you were taking pictures of me and selling my information? You heartless monster. I'm suing you. I'll see you in jail. The other clients in the spa erupted, surrounding Jessica, screaming accusations. Refund. This is a scam. Call the police. Arrest her. Was my information sold to? This is horrifying. The spa descended into chaos. Cries, curses, and the frantic shouts of employees trying to maintain order filled the air. Jessica stood in the middle of the angry mob, her face ashen, her body shaking uncontrollably. She looked at the confiscated products, the computer being carried away, which held all her client data and illicit records, and the faces of the clients who had once trusted her and now looked like they wanted to tear her apart. A wave of blackness washed over her. It was over. Her spa, her reputation, her carefully cultivated network, all gone. All that awaited her was a mountain of fines and, quite possibly, prison. The news flew back to the silent tomb of an apartment. Lauren was curled up on the living room couch, an empty shell of a person. Her phone screen was lit up with messages from a friend. Lauren, did you see? Kevin was arrested. They say he embezzled money to pay for prostitutes. His wife attacked him in the middle of his office. Jessica's spa got shut down. Tax agents and everything. They said she was selling fake products and taking secret photos of clients. So scary. Caleb's situation is even worse. His company is going bankrupt. I heard he's drowning in debt, and someone saw him kneeling in front of Julian's office building. Oh my God, Julian. What on earth did he do? Each message was a sledgehammer blow to Lauren's heart. Kevin, Jessica, Caleb, the names were all tied to that nightmarish reunion. Their simultaneous downfall could not be a coincidence. It was Julian. It had to be him. A cold tide of absolute terror washed over her, drowning her completely. She remembered his silence over the past few days, his deep, emotionless eyes, the cold, focused way he polished their wedding photo. It wasn't calmness. It was the horrifying stillness before a hurricane. The deep, dark abyss where a destructive storm was brewing. He knew. He knew everything, and he was enacting his revenge on everyone involved in the most cold-blooded, thorough way imaginable. Who? Who would be next? Lauren's body began to shake violently, her teeth chattering. She shot up from the couch and started pacing the living room like a trapped animal, consumed by panic. What should she do? Run. What could she run? Beg for mercy. Would Julian even listen? Her eyes, filled with an unbearable terror, were drawn to the closed door of the study. Not a sliver of light escaped from underneath it. It was completely silent inside. Julian was in there. The man who was once her husband, her closest confidant, was now the source of her deepest fear. She stared at the door as if it were the cage of a monster, ready to burst out and tear her to pieces. She didn't dare approach it, didn't dare knock, didn't even dare to make a sound. A huge, cold despair, like a physical chain, locked her to the spot, rendering her unable to move. Inside the study, Julian sat in the darkness, illuminated only by the cold, faint glow of his computer screen. On the monitor were several small, tiled windows. One showed the chaotic video of Kevin being arrested and attacked by his wife. Another was a news screenshot of Jessica's spa, sealed shut and surrounded by angry protesters. A third displayed a rolling ticker from a financial news site about Origin Core Tech's continued stock collapse and Caleb's impending criminal investigation. He watched them silently. The flickering light played across his expressionless face. His deep eyes held no emotion, only the cold, bottomless stillness of a frozen lake. He moved the mouse and clicked open an encrypted folder on his desktop. Inside lay a single video file. The file name was simple: Vibe, Humiliation. His mouse cursor hovered over the cold letters, the tip of his finger feeling strangely cool. From the living room, the sound of Lauren's suppressed, broken sobs faintly seeped through the heavy door, weak but clear. In the glow of the monitor, Julian's mouth twisted upward, very slowly, very coldly. The curve of it was as sharp as a blade. He picked up his phone from the desk, found Lauren's contact, and typed a message. Just 3 cold words: my study. Now. The phone screen suddenly lit up the dim living room, the stark white light like a bolt of lightning splitting the despairing shadow Lauren cast on the couch. On the screen, just 3 words from the one name she now feared most: my study. Now. Each word was a nail dipped in ice, hammered into her heart. Her blood seemed to freeze, then rush violently to her head, making her dizzy. She clutched the phone, her knuckles turning a dead white, her body shaking uncontrollably. It was here, the judgment she couldn't escape. Like a puppet controlled by invisible strings, she moved stiffly, one step at a time, toward the closed study door. Each step was as heavy as lead, the hollow sound of her feet on the cold floor echoing her own fraying nerves. She stopped in front of the door. She raised a hand, her fingertips icy, and held it just above the wood, unable to summon the courage to knock. There was no light coming from under the door, only a deep, silent darkness within. Finally, the string of her fear, stretched to its limit, snapped. She closed her eyes and, with all her remaining strength, pushed the door open. Creak! The hinges let out a soft groan. The study was dark. The heavy curtains were drawn tight, and the only light came from the cold, ghostly glow of the computer monitor on the desk. It was like a single, cold eye in the darkness. Julian sat behind it, his back to the door. She could only see his silent, straight-backed silhouette, the figure of a judge waiting in the shadows. Lauren's heart pounded, threatening to burst her chest. She stood in the doorway like a prisoner awaiting her sentence, her throat so tight she couldn't speak. The air was as thick as concrete, pressing down on her lungs. "Close the door," Julian's voice said. It wasn't loud, but it was calm, carrying a cold, unquestionable authority that echoed in the dead silence. Lauren flinched and, almost as a reflex, gently closed the door behind her. It shut out the last bit of faint light from the living room, plunging the study into a suffocating gloom, illuminated only by the monitor's cold glow on Julian's indistinct profile. He didn't turn around. He just moved the mouse. The next second, the screen began to play a video. The image was shaky and dark, and the deafening music and frenzied cheering instantly shattered the study silence. Lauren's pupils contracted violently. She saw it, the nightmare of that private room. The booth, herself, terrified and helpless, targeted by a dozen phone cameras. And Caleb, his face, wearing that triumphant smile. And his hand, reaching for her skirt amidst the insane screams of "up the skirt. Do it," forcing its way under her dress. "No, don't look." Lauren let out a piercing scream, as if she'd been splashed with hot oil. She lunged for the desk, her hands reaching out to cover the screen, to turn off the humiliating images. Julian was faster. Without even turning his head, he raised an arm and blocked her with a precise, firm movement. The force wasn't great, but it was cold, absolute, and final. Lauren stumbled backward from the block, crashing into a nearby bookshelf. A few books tumbled to the floor. Ignoring the pain, she slid down the bookshelf until she was huddled on the carpet, her hands clamped over her ears as she sobbed hysterically. "Turn it off. Please turn it off. I was wrong. I know I was wrong, Julian. I was drunk that night. They made me do it. It was Caleb. He forced me. I forced you." Julian finally swiveled his chair around. The monitor's cold light illuminated his face. It was still handsome, but it was completely devoid of expression, like a perfectly carved ice sculpture. His deep eyes held no anger, no sadness, only a bottomless, terrifyingly cold stillness. He looked down at the pathetic, weeping mess that was Lauren, collapsed on the floor. His gaze was like he was looking at a piece of shattered, filthy trash. His voice was terrifyingly calm, as if he were stating a simple, objective fact. "In the video, did you refuse? Did you push him away? Did you scream for help?" Lauren's sobs died in her throat, as if she'd been strangled. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. In the video, there was only terror, helpless trembling, futile attempts to shrink away. There was no clear, forceful resistance. Numbed by alcohol and crushed by the pressure of the group, her will to fight back had already been broken. Later, Julian's voice continued, each word a cold blade slicing through the air. When he took you with him, did you refuse? In the hotel room, did you fight back? Each question was a red-hot poker, searing the most shameful parts of her memory. She remembered Caleb's seductive words in the hallway, the collapse of her own will, the weak, powerless no in the hotel room. It wasn't a refusal. It was a moan of despair. I was drunk. I don't remember anything. She could only repeat the same pathetic, feeble excuse, her voice shattered. Drunk. The corner of Julian's mouth twisted upwards in a cold, sharp, and utterly mocking arc. Being drunk is your excuse for betraying our marriage, for breaking our vows, for lying under another man? No, Julian, I love you. I only love you. Lauren grabbed at this last straw, struggling to crawl toward him to clutch at the leg of his pants. Forgive me. Just this once. I'll never do it again. I'm begging you. For the sake of the 2 years we had. 2 years. Julian sounded as if he'd just heard the most absurd word in the world. He leaned forward slightly, his cold gaze like a physical ice pick stabbing into her. Lauren, from the moment you agreed to play that game, from the moment you let his hand go under your dress, from the moment you walked into that hotel room with him, the only thing left between us is this. He pointed a finger at the frozen image on the monitor. The moment Caleb's hand disappeared under her skirt, the look of despair and humiliation on her face. The image was a poisoned dagger, plunging into Lauren's heart, making all her excuses and pleas seem pathetic and laughable. She collapsed back onto the floor, too exhausted even to cry, her body racked with uncontrollable, desperate shivers. Julian straightened up, no longer looking at her. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk and took out a manila envelope, his movements unhurried. Then, from the back of the drawer, he retrieved a small, deep red booklet with a gold emblem on the front, their marriage certificate. He tossed both the envelope and the certificate onto the carpet in front of her. They landed with a soft thud. Sign it. Julian's voice held no emotion. He was a judge delivering a final, cold verdict. Sign the divorce papers. The house, the cars, the savings, all marital assets are mine. You leave with nothing. Leave with nothing. Lauren looked up in disbelief at the cold envelope and the glaring red booklet on the floor. A new wave of panic seized her. No, Julian, you can't. I'll have nothing. You'll have something. Julian cut her off, his voice as cold as iron. You'll have your love. You'll have your Caleb. Go find him. See if he can still give you a home. See if he can still take care of you like before. He emphasized the last words with raw, undisguised sarcasm. No, I won't sign. I'm not getting a divorce. Cornered and desperate, Lauren lunged, trying to snatch the papers and the certificate. Julian was faster. He stepped forward, the toe of his leather shoe landing precisely on the envelope and on the back of Lauren's outstretched hand. Lauren cried out as a sharp, crushing pain shot through her hand. Julian looked down at her, his eyes devoid of pity, filled only with cold, absolute control. The game is over, Lauren, he said, his voice low, imbued with a final, chilling cruelty. Sign it and get out with some dignity. Or, he paused, his gaze flicking to the humiliating image frozen on the screen, the cold curve of his lips deepening. I can make sure this video shows up in the inbox of your parents, all your relatives, and every single one of your coworkers. Let everyone see how the pure, beautiful Lauren gets felled up at a reunion before running off to a hotel with her high school sweetheart. Which option do you think is more dignified? Lauren's body went rigid, her blood turning to ice. She looked up into Julian's deep, cold, emotionless eyes. She knew he wasn't joking. A man who could bankrupt Caleb, ruin Kevin, and get Jessica thrown in jail. He was absolutely capable of making that video public. The immense terror finally broke her. Compared to leaving with nothing, the prospect of being utterly disgraced, of being scorned by everyone she had ever known, was an abyss she could not bear to face. The last spark of light in her eyes died. All her struggles, her pleas, her excuses dissolved into absolute despair and silence. Like a soulless doll, she slowly, tremblingly, pulled her aching hand out from under his shoe. Then, with her other, equally trembling hand, she picked up the pen from the floor. The tip hovered over the signature line of the divorce agreement, shaking like a leaf in the wind. Large tears splashed onto the paper, blurring the ink. She bit her lip until she tasted blood and, with every ounce of strength she had left, signed her name. Each stroke was a knife carving into her heart. After the last letter, all her strength left her. The pen slipped from her fingers and fell silently onto the carpet. She sat there, her eyes vacant, staring into space, no longer looking at Julian, no longer looking at the papers that sealed her fate. Julian bent down and picked up the signed agreement and the glaring red marriage certificate. He didn't glance at her, as if she were nothing more than a bothersome obstruction in the room. He walked to his desk, picked up a pre-prepared envelope bearing the logo of a prominent law firm, stuffed the documents inside, and sealed it. The county clerk's office. 9 a.m. Tomorrow, he said, his back to her, his voice cold. Bring your ID. Don't be late. With that, he walked out of the study, carrying the envelope. He opened the door, and the light from the living room flooded in, silhouetting his tall, cold figure. He didn't look back. The heavy door closed softly behind him with a final click. The sound was a death knell, echoing in Lauren's empty world. The study was silent again, save for the ghostly glow of the computer monitor and the broken doll of a woman huddled on the floor. On the screen, the humiliating scene remained, a silent mockery of everything she had lost. She curled into a ball, burying her face in her knees. Suppressed, desperate sobs filled the cold, unfamiliar room, the low, keening sound of a dying animal. She finally understood. From the moment she had walked into that private room, from the moment she had allowed that game to begin, she had been digging her own grave. And Julian was merely the one who had calmly and precisely pushed her in and shoveled the last pile of dirt on top. The game was well and truly over. Lauren didn't know how she left the place she once called home. She just remembered walking like a zombie, dragging a small suitcase packed with a few hastily gathered old clothes, the only things that were truly hers. He meant it when he said she would leave with nothing. Julian hadn't even let her take a single piece of jewelry he'd bought her. She didn't dare look back at the closed door. She had nowhere to go. Her parents' house. She couldn't imagine their reaction if they saw her like this, if they knew the truth. Her friends? The ones who had once envied her for marrying so well would now only be witnesses to her shame. In the end, she used the last of her money to rent the cheapest single room in a dark, damp motel in a rough part of town. The room was tiny and cramped, smelling of cheap disinfectant and mildew. The walls were stained, the sheets a dingy yellow. Lauren threw her suitcase in a corner and slid down the cold wall to the floor, hugging her knees, burying her face. A vast emptiness and a cold despair enveloped her, leaving her too drained even to cry. Her phone vibrated. It was her boss. Lauren's heart clenched as she answered with a shaking hand. Lauren? What the hell is going on? You've been a no-show for 3 days. You're not answering your phone. Do you even want this job anymore? Her manager's voice was sharp with annoyance and anger. And Mr. Henderson, I'm so sorry. I had a family emergency. Lauren's voice was hoarse and raspy, thick with emotion. An emergency? What kind of emergency keeps you from even calling in? There are rules here, Lauren. I need you to come to the office right now and explain yourself. Otherwise, I'm processing your termination for job abandonment. His tone was unforgiving. I'll be right there. Lauren didn't dare argue. She hung up. She looked at her own haggard reflection in the cracked mirror, her eyes swollen and red. Forcing herself to move, she splashed cold water on her face, quickly tried to fix her hair to hide the still faint marks on her neck, and rushed to the office. The moment she stepped into the lobby of the office building, she could feel that something was wrong. A few colleagues she was friendly with saw her, then quickly looked away, hurrying off. The receptionist's gaze was strange, tinged with a faint, unmistakable contempt. A knot of dread formed in Lauren's stomach. She squared her shoulders and walked into the office. The usual low hum of activity abruptly stopped the moment she entered. Dozens of eyes, curious, searching, gloating, or openly scornful, pricked at her like needles. She kept her head down and walked quickly to her desk. She had barely sat down when her manager, Mr. Henderson, walked over, his face a grim mask. He was holding an envelope. Lauren, my office. Now. His voice was ice. In his office, the head of HR, a stern-looking woman, was also present. Lauren, Henderson said, pushing the envelope across the desk toward her without any preamble. The company has decided to terminate your employment. This is your notice and your final paycheck. Please sign here. Terminated? The word hit Lauren like a physical blow. She shot to her feet. Why? Mr. Henderson, I had a family emergency. I can explain. Explain. The HR woman adjusted her glasses, her voice clipped and professional. Ms. Adams, Your termination is not solely due to your unexcused absences. We have received certain complaints and evidence regarding your personal conduct. It has had a significantly negative impact on the company's image and our team environment. The decision is final. Please cooperate. Personal conduct? Evidence. All the blood drained from Lauren's face. She felt a deep, chilling cold spread through her. She thought of the video. It had to be Julian. Who else had it? Who else could so precisely and systematically destroy every part of her life? No, that's slander. It's fake, she argued desperately, her voice cracking. Whether it's slander or not is of no interest to us. Henderson cut her off impatiently, his eyes filled with undisguised disgust. Sign the papers, take your money, and go. Don't make this uglier than it already is. It won't end well for you. His tone was heavy with meaning. Lauren looked at their cold, contemptuous faces, at the termination letter on the desk, and the last of her strength evaporated. She knew any further argument was useless. If Julian wanted her destroyed, he would leave no stone unturned. With a trembling hand, she picked up the pen and signed her name. Each letter felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She grabbed the thin envelope containing her meager final paycheck and fled the office, the stares of her former colleagues burning into her back. She ran out of the building and onto the bustling street. The sun was bright, but she felt no warmth. Her job was gone. Her home was gone. She had almost no money left. A tidal wave of despair washed over her, drowning her completely. She walked aimlessly, a zombie in a crowd of the living. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a motel manager. She had paid a security deposit and 1 month's rent for the tiny room. Ms. Adams, this month's rent and utilities are due, and next quarter's rent is due a month in advance. When are you going to transfer the money? I'm a little short on cash right now. Could you give me a few more days? Lauren pleaded. A few more days? No way. He refused instantly. The contract is clear. Either you pay on time, or you move out today. I got a line of people waiting to rent this room. Please. No more excuses. Either I have the money by 5 p.m. today or you're out. If you're not, I'll have your stuff thrown on the street. The manager snarled and hung up. Listening to the dial tone, Lauren finally broke. She squatted down on the busy street corner and, no longer able to control it, began to sob uncontrollably. Passers-by stared, pointed, and whispered. She didn't care anymore. Nothing mattered. She just wanted to find a hole and disappear. She trudged back to the dark motel, utterly defeated. As she approached, she saw the manager standing outside her room with a sleazy-looking man in a loud Hawaiian shirt. Her suitcase had been tossed onto the dirty hallway floor, and the door to her room was wide open. "Oh, you're back," the manager said, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he gave her a sideways glance. "Rinse up, grab your junk, and get out. This gentleman is waiting to move in." I don't have anywhere to go yet," Lauren stammered, seeing her only possessions thrown on the floor. "Not my problem," the manager said, waving his hand dismissively. "Get lost. Don't hold up my business." He shot a look at the man in the Hawaiian shirt. The man grinned, stepping forward, his eyes slimily crawling all over Lauren's body. "Hey there, sweet thing. Nowhere to go. Why don't you come with me? I got a big place, big bed. I'll make sure you're comfortable." He reached out, trying to touch her face. "Get away from me." Lauren screamed, recoiling. She grabbed her suitcase and fled down the narrow, dark stairs as if her life depended on it, the manager's curses and the man's sleazy laughter echoing behind her. She dragged her suitcase through the unfamiliar streets like a stray dog. The sky began to darken, and the city lights came on, the glittering metropolis a world away from her reality. She was exhausted, starving, and broke. She couldn't even afford a bottle of water. Despair was a cold vine, wrapping around her neck, squeezing tighter and tighter. She found a relatively quiet park and sat on a bench in the darkest corner. The early autumn wind was chilly, cutting through her thin clothes and making her shiver. She hugged her knees, buried her face, and cried silent tears. In this big, wide world, there was no place for her. After some time, the sharp click of high heels approached and stopped in front of her. Lauren looked up, dazed. In the dim lamplight stood a heavily made-up, slightly overweight middle-aged woman. Her face was a mask of twisted rage and deep-seated hatred as she stared down at Lauren. The woman looked vaguely familiar, but Lauren couldn't place her. "Are you Lauren Adams?" The woman's voice was shrill. Who are you?" Lauren asked, shrinking back warily. "Who am I?" The woman's voice shot up an octave. "I'm Kevin's wife. The wife of the man you got fired, the man you made a fool of, the man who's now sitting in a jail cell because of you." Lauren felt as if she'd been plunged into ice water. Kevin's wife. How did she find her? You bitch. Before Lauren could react, the woman lunged like an enraged lioness. She grabbed a handful of Lauren's hair and, with her long nails, raked them viciously across Lauren's face. Arg! Searing pain exploded across Lauren's scalp and face. She screamed and struggled, but the woman's heavy body pinned her down. It's all your fault. You goddamn jinx. You whore. Kevin's wife sobbed and screamed as she beat and clawed at her. If it wasn't for your stupid reunion, if you hadn't been flirting with Caleb, my husband never would have gone to prostitutes. He never would have stolen that money. You did this. You ruined my family. You ruined my life. I'm going to kill you, you shameless piece of trash. Fists, slaps, and nails rained down on Lauren's body and face. She was powerless to fight back, able only to curl into a ball, trying to protect her head as she whimpered and begged for mercy. Her suitcase was kicked over, its contents spilling onto the ground. The few people passing by were shocked by the violent scene, staring from a distance but not daring to intervene. Kill her. Serves her right. The other woman. Home wrecker. The muttered comments reached Lauren's ears, each one like salt poured into her bleeding wounds. She gave up struggling, letting the blows land. The physical pain was nothing compared to the soul-crushing despair of being abandoned and despised by the entire world. After what felt like an eternity, Kevin's wife seemed to tire, and she stopped, panting heavily. She looked down at the crumpled figure on the ground, disheveled, bloody, like a broken doll, and spat. TCH. Filth. This is what you deserve, she snarled. She straightened her own clothes, tossed her hair back, and stalked off like a victorious general. Lauren was left alone, lying on the cold, dirty ground under the dim lamplight, the indifferent or contemptuous stares of strangers her only witnesses, as blood and tears streamed silently down her face. Hell, no, hell had boundaries. Where she was now was a desert far colder and more desolate than any hell. There was no light, no hope, only an endless fall, a death by 1,000 cuts. The cold night dew-soaked through her thin clothes, stinging the raw scratches and bruises on her skin. She didn't know how long she lay on the ground before, with the last ounce of her strength, she managed to push herself up. Her face, arms, and body were a mess of angry welts and scrapes. Her hair was a tangled mat. Her lip was split and bleeding. Looking like a soldier crawling from a battlefield, she stumbled away from the park that had been the scene of her second public humiliation, dragging her broken suitcase behind her. She had nowhere to go. Like a wounded stray cat, she ended up in the small, cold glass enclosure of a 24-hour ATM vestibule. It at least offered shelter from the wind. Every ding-dong of the automatic door made her flinch and curl up tighter, terrified of who might come in next. Hunger and cold were two snakes, gnawing away at her will. She pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked, a perfect metaphor for her life. The battery was at 5%. With trembling fingers, she scrolled through her contacts. Her parents' names stung her eyes. She couldn't call them. Friends? Who would want to talk to her now? Finally, her eyes landed on the name Caleb, the name that had brought her a fleeting moment of excitement and vanity and ultimately dragged her into this abyss. Now, he was the only piece of driftwood she could see, even though she knew it was an illusion. She dialed his number. It rang and rang, then went to a cold, automated voice. The subscriber you have dialed is currently unavailable. She tried again, and again, the same result. The last, faint glimmer of hope was extinguished. The phone screen flickered and died, becoming a cold, black rectangle in her hand. Darkness consumed her. She hugged her knees, her body shaking violently from cold and despair, a low, animalistic whimper escaping her throat. She felt herself being slowly devoured by the infinite cold. Hours passed. The traffic outside grew sparse. Dawn was breaking. A paperboy on his morning route stuffed a stack of newspapers into the rack outside. The headline on the top paper, accompanied by a large, clear photo, shattered Lauren's dazed consciousness like a bolt of lightning. The photo was of Caleb. He was wearing a bright orange prison jumpsuit, his hair unkempt, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow and defeated. He was being escorted by 2 police officers, ducking his head to get into the back of a police car. Above the photo, a massive, blood-red headline screamed, Court, Tech CEO Caleb Hayes formally arrested on charges of financial fraud, embezzlement. Billion-dollar empire collapses overnight. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. She scrambled to the glass door, pressing her face against it, her eyes locked on the newspaper. Caleb was arrested. He was really, truly finished. Just then, the giant LED screen next to the newsstand, which had been showing a makeup ad, switched to the local morning news. The anchor appeared, her expression serious. "We have an update on the case of former Summit Construction Supply sales manager, Kevin Miller. Police sources have confirmed that Miller has confessed to embezzling over $1.2 million in company funds to finance his gambling and solicitation habits. His wife filed for divorce yesterday and has requested a freeze on all his assets. Miller is facing a sentence of 10 years or more." The screen cut to an interview with Kevin's wife. Her eyes were red and swollen as she spoke to the camera. "I was blind to marry him. He didn't just destroy our family, he destroyed me. I want a divorce. I want him to leave with nothing. I want him to rot in prison." The news segment shifted again, showing the sealed entrance of Elysian Beauty Spa, surrounded by a crowd of angry protesters holding signs that read, "Heartless Jessica Miller, give us our money back, and selling our private photos is a crime." A reporter was interviewing one of the protesters. "What can you tell us about Jessica Miller? What are your demands?" "She's gone. That evil bitch took the money and ran," the woman screamed, waving her arms. "But she won't get away. The police are looking for her. There are dozens of us suing her. She sold me products that ruin my skin. She took pictures of me changing in the dressing room. I want her in jail. I want her to pay. I want her to lose everything." The final shot was of the chaotic, angry mob outside the shuttered spa. Inside the ATM vestibule, Lauren slid down the cold glass wall to the floor. The glaring light from the LED screen illuminated her deathly pale, blood-streaked face. She saw Caleb in his prison jumpsuit, heard Kevin's wife demanding a divorce, watched the angry mob surround Jessica's business. Each image was a sledgehammer, crashing down on her already shattered heart. Caleb, imprisoned. Kevin, divorced and disgraced, facing a long sentence. Jessica, ruined and on the run. And herself, jobless, homeless, penniless, beaten on the street, treated like a rat. Every single person who had participated in that game, everyone who had cheered and enabled and pushed her toward the abyss that night, had, without exception, been cast into their own personal hell. Who? Who had the power, the precision, the cold-blooded resolve to weave such a perfect, all-encompassing web of destruction? The answer was unavoidable. Julian, her husband, whom she had once thought was quiet, reserved, and easy to handle. The man who, after her betrayal, had enacted the most thorough and brutal revenge with the calmest demeanor. An icy chill shot up from the soles of Lauren's feet and consumed her entire body, plunging her into a frozen terror that made her very soul tremble. She finally truly understood what kind of man she had provoked. He wasn't an angry lion. He was the cold god of death, lurking in the shadows, holding the power of life and ruin in his hands. She clamped a hand over her mouth as her stomach churned violently. It wasn't from her physical injuries. It was from the bone-deep fear and the absolute, crushing despair. She didn't even dare to wonder if Julian's revenge on her was over, or if this was just the beginning. She curled up in the cold corner as the sky outside grew brighter. But none of that light could penetrate the endless, eternal darkness that had become her world. Orion Tower, top floor, CEO's office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the morning sun rose, painting the entire city in a brilliant gold. The traffic below was a flowing river, and the city was waking up, vibrant and full of life. Julian stood at the window, his back to the door. He was wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, his posture as straight and unyielding as a pine tree. The sunlight traced the sharp lines of his profile as he calmly surveyed the bustling metropolis below. A soft knock came at the door. "Enter." Julian's voice was steady. A sharp, professional female assistant in a business suit walked in, holding a file, her expression a mixture of efficiency and a faint, respectful fear. "Mr. Vance, here's the final report on the Origin Core tech liquidation, along with the legal documents for our acquisition of their core assets. They just need your signature. Also, we've received word from the SEC and the police. The case against Caleb Hayes is airtight, and he has confessed to all charges. He's looking at a minimum of 15 years. Julian turned, took the file, and quickly scanned the cold numbers and legal jargon. His face was a blank canvas, as if he were reviewing a routine business proposal. He picked up a pen from his desk and signed his name in the designated spots. The strokes were sharp, powerful. Kevin Miller of Summit Construction Supplies, the assistant continued, was found guilty of embezzlement and solicitation. With the charges combined, he was sentenced to 12 years in his initial hearing. His wife has already divorced him and was awarded what little assets he had left. As for Jessica Miller, The police have issued a warrant for her arrest. She's wanted on multiple charges, including tax evasion, selling counterfeit goods, and felony invasion of privacy. Once she's caught, she'll also be facing a substantial prison term. Julian handed the signed documents back to his assistant, his movements calm and deliberate. "I know," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. The assistant took the file, but hesitated for a moment before asking in a low voice, "Sir, there's also the matter of Ms. Adams. Our contacts report that last night she was kicked out of a motel in the industrial district. Later, she was assaulted in a public park by Kevin Miller's wife. She seems to be taking shelter in an ATM vestibule." Julian's gaze drifted back to the rising sun. The golden light filled his deep eyes, but could not melt the profound ice within. He was silent for a few seconds before he finally spoke, his voice as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "You don't need to report on her anymore." "Yes, sir." The assistant understood immediately. She said no more, gave a respectful nod, and quietly let herself out, closing the door softly behind her. The massive office was silent again. The sunlight filled the room with a warm, golden glow, but it couldn't dispel the cold, invisible aura of detachment that surrounded Julian. He walked to his large mahogany desk. On its polished surface, beside his computer and files, sat the gleaming, dust-free silver photo frame. Inside was the 2-year-old wedding photo. Lauren's smile was bright as she leaned against him. Julian's gaze rested on the photo for a few seconds. His eyes were still calm, holding no nostalgia and no hatred, only a deep, complete void. It was as if the person in the picture were a total stranger. He reached out, not for the frame, but for the neatly folded white cloth beside it. He picked up the cloth and, with a gentle, focused movement, began to polish the glass surface one last time. His fingers moved slowly, meticulously, over Lauren's smiling face, over her white dress, over his own faintly smiling profile. Back and forth. In the sunbeams, tiny dust motes danced. The only sound in the quiet office was the soft swish of the cloth against the glass. He polished for a long time, with great care, as if performing a silent final farewell. At last he stopped. He folded the cloth neatly and put it back in its place. Then he picked up the silver frame and, without a second glance, walked to the large, gleaming metal trash can in the corner of the office. He let go. Clang. The frame hit the bottom of the empty can with a sharp, cold echo. The glass surface caught the light from the window in one last, blinding flash. Julian didn't look down. He turned, walked back to his desk, and sat down in the large leather chair. The sun cast a golden halo around him, but it couldn't warm the profound cold in his eyes. He picked up a crystal glass from his desk, filled with an amber liquid. Ice cubes clinked against the side. He swirled the glass, then raised it slowly, elegantly, toward the rising sun and the endless possibilities of the new day. The sunlight refracted through the glass, casting a brilliant light into his deep eyes. The coldness was still there, but the very edge of it, a faint ember glowed, like the last warmth from a fire long since burned out. A ghost of satisfaction. He tilted his head back and drained the glass in one smooth motion. The liquor burned its way down his throat, a welcome fire that incinerated the last lingering shadows of the past. He set the empty glass down on the desk. It made a soft, definitive click. Outside, the sun was bright, the city was alive, and hell was empty. The end.